Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the February 19, 2019 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call tonight's meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already done so and would like to pick up a copy, you can follow along with tonight's proceedings. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to things that are on our agenda, as well as a segment under item 5, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature. At that point in the evening, any members of the audience who wish to make a comment or ask a question of a general nature with respect to something that is not on tonight's agenda, that would be the time to please come to the podium, let us know who you are, and we would welcome hearing from you at that time. It is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'd like to ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I ask for the roll call, I just want to, on behalf of myself and all members of the Village Council, as well as the whole community, express our deep concerns and best wishes for a student who was involved in a very tragic accident today in front of Downers Grove North High. Our thoughts and prayers are with both her and her family, and we are all pulling for her and hope that God sees fit to make this turn out okay. With that, I would like to ask our Assistant Village Clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Wallace? Here. Commissioner Earl? Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, which pertains to our approval of minutes from prior council meetings. We have one set of minutes to review and approve tonight. Those are the minutes from our regular council meeting on February 12th, 2019. Unless there are any changes or comments, questions, or concerns, I would ask for a motion to approve those minutes, please.
I totally move the council approve the meeting minutes of February 12, 2019 as presented.
Second.
All in favor, signify.
I guess we passed it.
I didn't touch the thing. This is going to be real awkward in a minute.
Let's try not to interrupt the votes anymore, Mayor. Sorry.
No, it's not up on screen anymore.
All in favor?
All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. All right, that brings us to the mayor's report. And tonight, we have a very special mayor's report. The tradition of a chief executive giving a verbal State of the Union address dates back to January 8th, 1790, when President George Washington delivered the first annual report, which was not yet referred to as a State of the Union address. And he gave that before a joint session of Congress at a meeting in New York City. In Downers Grove, we have developed our own similar tradition, which has become known as the State of the Village Address, which is designed to highlight some of the successes of the past year. Now, while we're getting the presentation back up on screen, I want to just note that none of the successes that I'll be talking about tonight that occurred in 2018 would have been possible. You need to get in there? No worries. Would have been possible without the collaborative and dedicated efforts of a significant team comprised of village staff, my fellow elected officials, stakeholder partnerships we have with private, public, and not-for-profit organizations. There you go. See, I knew if I just talked long enough, we'd figure this out. As well as the members of our various boards and commissions who serve as volunteers and the community at large. And our crack technical staff, including Doug Kozlowski. Now, it is my pleasure to present to you the most significant achievements of the past year as part of the 2018 annual report. Now, the format of the report will follow that featured in the Inside DG publication that is available to all residents. These and future editions are available on the village website at www.downers.us. But rather than looking at a static example, we'll show you what you might expect if you were to open up a copy of Inside DG.
Check out the latest edition of Inside DG.
From cover to cover, this issue is packed with 2018 highlights. Read all about historic preservation, take a fresh look at peer jury, see the brand new training tower, and so much more. Pierce D gives it 5 stars. This is an issue you won't want to miss. The 2018 Year in Review is available online right now at downers.us.
The items that I'll be covering this evening are going to be tied to the 5 strategic goals that are found in the village's long-range plan implemented and in effect from 2017 through 2019. It calls for the village to be good stewards of both financial, environmental, and neighborhood sustainability, to provide exceptional municipal services, top-quality infrastructure, a strong, diverse local economy, and to continually innovate. So as shown in the video you just saw, tonight's report will tie each item I discuss to one of the village's 5 strategic goals. So let's start with the one that is always in the top of everyone's mind, and that is financial sustainability. We have many good things to report for 2018 and the 2019 budget that we are already into. A balanced general fund, no increases in the property tax levy for village operations for the 8th year in a row, and a continued commitment to infrastructure. But why should I just tell you these things when I can show you things, particularly from the voice of Downers Grove, Doug Kozlowski?
The village has just delivered the proposed 2019 budget. It's ready for review at downers.us. Inside, you'll find a balanced general fund with revenues and expenses of $48 million. For the 8th year in a row, there's no increase in the property tax levy for village operations. However, an increase in the levy is required by state law for public safety pensions. The proposed budget includes a net reduction of more than 3 full-time staff positions. You'll also discover a commitment to continued infrastructure investment with more than $24 million included for streets, stormwater, and water system improvements. Join the budget discussions during the council meetings starting October 2nd at Village Hall. See you there.
And for those of you that joined us in those budget discussions last October, we greatly appreciate your input. Obviously, we're in 2019 now, and we're going forward with the budget that was adopted last year for this year. Now, one thing that I hear from time to time from folks is, okay, you're always telling us about this Standard & Poor's AAA bond rating. What's the big deal? And I thought, well, who better to explain that to us than, of course, Doug Kozlowski.
Here in Downers Grove, we take great care in managing your tax dollars. Since 2013, we've received Standard & Poor's highest AAA bond rating. This rating allows for the financing of infrastructure projects at the lowest possible cost and millions of dollars in savings for taxpayers. AAA bond ratings are challenging to achieve, and Downers Grove is one of only 23 municipalities in the entire state of Illinois to earn this top rating. Standard & Poor's determined that the village has very strong management conditions, very strong budgetary flexibility, strong budgetary performance, and a very strong economy. Managing tax dollars is a big responsibility, and we're always working to maximize value when public dollars are being spent. To learn more about village finances, please visit our website at downers.us.
Now, I hope you're all taking good notes because there will be a test at the end of the report. The first one's going to be, what is the village website address? One of the things that we like to do in Downers Grove is to achieve and solutions. So it's not just financial sustainability and top quality municipal services. When we can do, it's not just one or the other, when we can do both. So I want to talk a little bit about an example of both delivering top quality municipal services as well as good financial stewardship. And that is an example through our top performing police department. 2018 presented us with some unique opportunities to redesign several open positions in the police department. We reassigned some support services to non-sworn employees, maintained our service levels, and reduced staffing by 2.63 full-time employee positions, and overall reduced annual expenses from the police department by over $400,000. Now, you would think with all that trimming and all that leanness that that might have some kind of impact on the ability to also achieve a top-performing police department. Well, if you thought that, you'd be dead wrong. Because the Downers Grove Police Department has been awarded the gold standard accreditation with excellence through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, also known as CALEA. The department also received the Meritorious Award for achieving 15 or more consecutive years of accreditation, a new milestone for the Village of Downers Grove. Now, accreditation with excellence, I'm glad you asked, is the highest level of recognition awarded by CALEA. Only about 4% of law enforcement agencies in the United States have achieved accreditation through CALEA. This excellence designation places the village among a select few which meet CALEA's rigorous professional standards. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is possible to do more with less, as this example shows. The police department also is always looking for ways to add to their capabilities through the funds that are available from outside Downers Grove. One example in providing top quality municipal services and also good financial stewardship is the pursuit of grant funding for various different items. We're always looking for grant opportunities because grant dollars are, of course, your dollars, and the village has an obligation to go after them and bring them back here to Downers Grove to serve our community and to implement our strategic mission whenever we can. One example last year was a grant that funded 20 new bulletproof vests for our officers. Now, of course, I couldn't talk about our outstanding police department without also giving kudos and talking about our outstanding fire department. Another one of the things that you saw earlier included among our strategic goals is continual innovation as well as top quality municipal services. Well, here's another example of an "and" solution. Through a partnership between the Downers Grove Fire Department and the Darien Woodridge Fire District, we were able to improve emergency medical response. This gets paramedics quickly to patients in need of urgent medical care. The department closest to a call is dispatched. This is a good form of mutual aid. This resulted in improved response times in the southeast portion of the village in compliance with recommended response time. This is also a good example of our pursuit of the 3 C's: cooperation, collaboration, and consolidation. This is a good example of cooperation and collaboration to provide better services with no increased cost. Now, another example of innovation and high-quality municipal services was the new training tower that the fire department debuted in August of 2018 at a ribbon cutting. You see it pictured here. It's a fire department training tower that is very ingenious in that it is made of shipping containers, 3 stories tall, and is on location at Fire Station Number 1 that provides more frequent training operations for our first responders, including live fire training in a controlled environment. Best of all, this is 100% funded by insurance companies doing business in Illinois, something called the Foreign Fire Insurance Fund. But why should you take my word for it when Chief Pendelski can tell you a lot more about it than I can?
We're here today at Downers Grove Fire Department Station 101, and behind me here is our newly dedicated training facility. As an ISO Class 1 department, it is imperative that each member of our department is trained at the highest level possible.
We held a mini academy here and we did live fire training where we actually had to go in, extinguish the fire, rescue victims, ladder drills, basically any live fire situation that we could face out on the streets, we put our new recruits through in their orientation.
This tower was funded entirely through the Foreign Fire Insurance Fund, which is generated by out-of-state insurance companies doing business in Illinois. No local tax dollars were used on this project. Our department prides itself on being prepared for the future. We remain focused on delivering safe, effective, and efficient service. This training facility is going to be instrumental in the accomplishment of that mission.
We want to be known for being good for our job, be professional, and we wanted to see something like this come to our town because it allows us to perfect our craft.
Another goal, strategic goal of the village is to provide top quality infrastructure. And 2018 was no exception. In 2018, the village invested $14.6 million in improvements. This included $5.4 million in streets and sidewalks, $4.6 million in our water systems, and $4.6 million also in our stormwater systems. Now, truth be told, this is a continuation of our investment in infrastructure that's been going on for many years. And one area that is particularly important to us is not only maintaining quality infrastructure, but also neighborhood sustainability and managing our stormwater assets. We make a substantial annual investment in stormwater, as mentioned with respect to 2018, but it goes back much further. Since 2008, the village has completed approximately 60 stormwater capital improvement projects at a cost of about $35 million. The village currently has plans to construct another 13 stormwater capital projects between 2019 and 2022 at an estimated cost of about another $15 million. These completed and planned projects reduce the frequency and severity of the flooding of structures and streets caused by moderate to severe rain events. More projects are expected to be identified and prioritized in the 2019 through 2020 time period. But that's only really one part of the equation. That's maintaining what we already have, and that's building new projects and trying to address issues that already exist. What 2018 also saw was the council strengthen significantly our stormwater regulations with an eye towards minimizing or eliminating any new problems that might be caused by redevelopment in our community. The council spent a fair amount of time working with staff, the building community, as well as residents in general, to come up with strengthened stormwater regulations that will reduce the negative impact of runoff while continuing to accommodate both redevelopment and residential renovations. So it's a two-pronged attack. Number one is go after the existing problems as we continue to do through investment, and also strengthen our stormwater regulations to try to decrease or minimize any additional problems that might be caused. And that's something that this and future councils will continue to focus on. Another key element of our strategic goals is maintaining a strong and diverse local economy. And there's lots to talk about here in 2018. We saw many new retail and restaurant developments come to Downers Grove. A Lincoln certified pre-owned dealership, Car Lots, another car dealership. Cooper's Hawk recently received zoning approval, and the demolition has already taken place. City Barbecue, Mod Pizza, Core Life Eatery, Panda Express, Pierce Tavern, which I believe the wait is now down to about 90 minutes. Cadence Kitchen, Great Harvest Bread Company, Outback Steakhouse, a new Aldi, and Hobby Lobby, all located to our community. We had some really, really unique and major projects, not just for Downers Grove in 2018, but for DuPage County, and in some cases for the state of Illinois. I'll mention 3 projects in 2018 that were truly exceptional. Rexnord completed almost a 250,000 square foot aerospace manufacturing facility in the Ellsworth Industrial Park. This, of course, was largely due to a very innovative and creative partnership between the Village of Downers Grove and District 99 and District 58 in order to come up with an attractive incentive package for Rexnord, which was in competition with no less than the state of Florida. This occurred at a time when the state of Illinois had no budget, had no funds to attract and retain businesses. It was left to the municipality and the creativity of our Economic Development Corporation, our own staff, as well as our exceptional relationships with District 99 and District 58 that allowed us to put together a project and a program that kept Rexnord and all the jobs that come with it here in Downers Grove. Truly an exceptional example of collaboration among multiple taxing bodies. Bridge development. Bridge Point Downers Grove is a 678,000 square foot industrial/office development that is a joint venture of Bridge Development Partners and Banner Oak Capital Partners. This project, which is on a 54-acre site off of Lacey and Finley Roads, north of Warrenville Road, will be completed in early 2019. And if you've driven past there, you'll already see how that project is taking shape. Another terrific economic development win for the village was Green Bay Packaging, which is currently constructing its new 170,000 square foot complex in Downers Grove. Importantly, these projects were chosen in Downers Grove as a central location to serve the Chicagoland area and to allow for future growth of the business. In both instances, these projects choosing Downers Grove underscores our strategic advantage of where we are located and our access to major transportation routes. I touched upon Ogden Avenue a little bit. Ogden Avenue continues to be a focus of the village as a major commercial corridor, and there's been lots to talk about there. Some of the businesses I've already mentioned along Ogden Avenue are featured here. But what does that mean for our residents? Well, just the project at the corner of Ogden and Main, the Vequity project, is projected to generate between $70,000 to $100,000 in net sales tax revenue, as well as nearly $24,000 per year in incremental property taxes. That's all net positive to the village and has greatly improved a major gateway to our community. A key component of making all these things happen is our comprehensive plan. Our plan has identified various areas within the village that are ripe for development and improvement, and the comprehensive plan really helps guide the decision-making process of the village and the community in figuring out where we want to turn our attention and make our investments to really improve the commercial success of our community long term. Now, those of you who have lived in Downers Grove for a long time will know that Ogden Avenue has changed a great deal over, say, the last 20 years. It would be one thing for me to talk about that. It would be a much better thing for me to show you. But Ogden Avenue isn't the only place that's seen investment by the village and a lot of changes over the years. Anyone who's been here for a while knows that our downtown has transformed significantly. In 1997, the village created the Downtown Tax Increment Financing District, designed to improve the infrastructure and to encourage private investment in the downtown. Over the last 20 years, oh gosh, I could give you a bunch of boring, dull, dry statistics, but why not let Doug Kozlowski tell you about it?
Since rising from the prairie 185 years ago, downtown Downers Grove has always been evolving. Like many suburban town centers in the 70s and 80s, changing patterns led people and money to other places. So in 1997, the village changed the course of the downtown by creating a financing tool to improve its infrastructure and encourage private investment. These improvements began to attract new businesses and development. And slowly, the downtown started to change. In the last 20 years, commercial space has grown by 69%, residential units by 89%. And downtown property values have grown by over 300%. The future of downtown Downers Grove is bright and continues to attract new businesses and development. You can learn more about plans for the downtown at downers.us.
The excitement and the progress in the downtown in 2018 was somewhat saddened by the passing of our very dear friend, Linda Kunze. For 20 years, Linda Kunze essentially was the embodiment of the downtown. As the director of the Downtown Management Corporation, Linda's legacy is overseeing a lot of the change that you just saw in that video. She will be forever associated with the downtown. Everyone knew Linda, Linda knew everyone, and she made everybody who came to Downers Grove, either longtime resident, visitor, or new resident, more than welcome to be part of our community. Countless businesses were guided by Linda in locating to the downtown, and she was always out and about at the various festivals, Ice Festival, Wine Walks, Fine Arts Festival, Grove Festival. Linda was always ubiquitous, and she will be sorely missed. Truly, she was the heart and soul of the downtown. The progress that you just saw, again, is her legacy. And we are very glad that soon we will be honoring Linda's legacy and her life by renaming the plaza at Main Street and the train station appropriately as Linda Kunze Plaza, where many of the events that she was associated with and planned and made part of our town took place. Now, all this progress that you've seen has occasionally raised some eyebrows with folks and have asked questions about will there be more and what will it look like, and should there be more input and feedback in terms of design, height, depth, girth, so on and so forth. The village, of course, has heard that, and members of this and prior councils had those same questions. So 2018 saw the village spend a great deal of time finalizing downtown rezoning with an eye towards what should the future development of our downtown be, now seeing the development that we have invited and have facilitated and fostered for the last 20 years. This goes towards a couple of strategic goals of the village, including neighborhood sustainability. The idea of the rezoning of the downtown was to establish zoning standards that ensure future development meets with the community's vision for the downtown. While it wrapped up in 2018, it was a 2.5-year public process, which many individuals participated in. All said, 77 properties were rezoned in the downtown, and the goal is to ensure that it remains an attractive and vibrant community centerpiece for decades to come. Now, we've talked about the north side of town, we've talked about Ogden Avenue, we've talked about the downtown of Downers Grove, but make no mistake, the village has not forgotten about other commercial corridors like 63rd and Woodward and 75th and Lamont. These too are key components of the comprehensive plan, and while it may not look like it, the village is spending a great deal of time and attention working towards future success stories for those commercial corridors as well. All I can say is stay tuned. Another strategic goal, as mentioned, is neighborhood sustainability. And one of the things that we're very proud of in our community is respecting our community's history. Preserving Downers Grove properties as historic landmarks is easier than ever. This has been made possible through another wonderful collaborative cooperation between property owners, the Village of Downers Grove, organizations like the Friends of the Edwards House, and the Downers Grove Historical Society. In 2018 alone, 4 landmark properties were protected. The Engstrom House at 1323 Maple Avenue, the Gorman Dumb House at 1205 Franklin Street, the Clifford House at 844 Maple, and the Ernest Bungie House at 1514 Thornwood. This brings the total to 25 landmark properties to date. And what I mean by to date, since the village ordinance regarding historic preservation was greatly enhanced in 2015 after having been first passed in 2007. So when we talk about our motto, which is Downers Grove preserves the balance between tradition and progress, some might say, well, that's a motto. Those are just words. Well, I'd like to go beyond the words and show you that Downers Grove truly does preserve the balance between tradition and progress. Once again, in Downers Grove, we don't settle for tradition or progress. We have an uncanny ability to deliver both, as the video you just saw shows, and we will continue to do that with the help of our staff. Innovation and environmental sustainability are also important strategic goals of the village. And one example in 2018 was the establishment in the open areas near the Belmont underpass of a pollinator garden. The garden will include milkweed to target monarch butterflies, building on efforts by surrounding suburbs to develop a monarch corridor along the BNSF Railroad. The village was awarded a grant for the garden through the ComEd Green Region program, which assists local communities in protecting and improving public spaces. Open Lands, a non-for-profit conservation land trust dedicated to protecting open spaces in the Chicago region for over 50 years, administers the Green Region program. The Conservation Foundation is partnering with the Village of Downers Grove on this project and providing their pollinator meadow mix for the garden. And it started to take root last year. We can only look forward to seeing it if winter ever leaves us. Innovation continues to be important at the Village of Downers Grove, and one, I would say, example of innovation is figuring things out. The Downers Grove Township operated a peer jury program serving municipalities within the township for many years. But in July of 2017, the township suspended operations of the program. This raised a fair amount of interest in both Downers Grove and surrounding communities. The Village of Downers Grove was a participant in the township program, sending approximately 24 cases per year to the peer jury, and had staffed hearings with police officers at a cost to us of about $3,400 a year. We took up the challenge, and I want to thank Commissioner Jose for the new business item that asked staff to look at whether, given the township's decision, whether the Village of Downers Grove could take a leadership role here and figure out how to make this work, since it was clearly an opportunity to do something very good and of high value to the community for a relatively low investment, which is not something that in government you can find an opportunity to do too often. So what is a peer jury? A peer jury is an alternative to court for first-time juvenile offenders of non-serious offenses. The sentences generally include some type of community service, an apology letter to victims, online coursework, counseling, or drug use assessments. The rebooted peer jury program, spearheaded by the Village of Downers Grove, began in January of 2019. It now provides restorative justice alternatives for youths committing minor first-time offenses. 36 students serve in the jury pool, and juvenile offenders must agree to participate. So far, I would hazard to say, the reboot of this program has been an unmitigated success. More change in Downers Grove occurred in 2018. For example, you now must be 21 years old in order to purchase tobacco products. The American Heart Association and others advocating that we be part of the Tobacco 21 initiative came to Downers Grove and asked us once again to be part of a corridor of health by increasing our minimum age for purchasing tobacco products or possessing tobacco products to 21. Downers Grove now has an ordinance that prohibits the sale, purchase, and possession of tobacco, alternative nicotine products, smoking materials, and drug paraphernalia to individuals under the age of 21. One thing that we pride ourselves on so much that it doesn't even need to be a strategic goal is engaging with the community. But I'll put this under the category of innovation because Downers Grove always seems to find yet another way to engage with the community. As it stands, there are numerous ways for residents to stay up on village news and information, and there are many ways to connect with us. E-News, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Inside DG, Downers Grove Television, and on and on and on. But wait, there's more. The village recently launched in 2018 a new Community Response Center app, which I'd love to show you on my phone, but you probably couldn't see it from the audience. So why do that when we can go to the tape? Now, just for the record, while Doug Kozlowski was not heard speaking in that video, Commissioner Waldeck, he was playing the accordion. Now, it's always nice to sit around and do things like this where we can celebrate our successes and raise the bar for future accomplishments. But it is nice to also be recognized outside of the village for some of the things that we've been doing. So I would be remiss if I didn't touch upon some of the awards that Downers Grove received outside of our community for its performance in 2018. And I'm just going to touch on a few. Going back to our outstanding Downers Grove Fire Department, they were recognized by the American Heart Association with its Mission Lifeline EMS Gold Achievement Award. This award measures and evaluates pre-hospital providers and their collaboration with local hospitals in the treatment of cardiac emergencies and strokes. The Downers Grove Fire Department met the AHA Gold status benchmark for serving patients suffering from heart attacks. In order to do so, the team must meet that benchmark 75% of the time for 24 consecutive months in order to qualify and maintain gold status. What does this mean? It means saving lives and improving patient outcomes by providing critical EMS care fast. And anyone in the modern world knows that more and more of our fire calls are EMS related. So this is very significant for our community. I talked a little bit earlier about our budget being in good shape. Well, it's not only in good shape, it looks darn good too. For the 9th consecutive year, the Village of Downers Grove has received the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Presentation, and this time it was for the 2018 municipal budget document. This is, again, as I mentioned, the 9th time that Village Finance Director Judy Butney and her team have been honored with this significant achievement. In fact, I believe that we need to purchase another trophy case in the back for all these distinguished budget awards, and it is reflecting a commitment of meeting the highest principles of government budgeting. So congratulations on that. We get asked sometimes about what we're doing to promote environmental sustainability. And not only do we promote that, but occasionally we get recognized and awarded for it. Once again, for this actually the 6th year in a row, the Downers Grove Village Fleet was awarded the Top 50 Greenest Fleet, Government Fleet Award. There are nearly 38,000 qualifying fleets, and we were in the top 50. It's good to know that 83% of the village fleet now utilizes some form of alternative fuel. This includes biodiesel, ethanol, compressed natural gas, and propane, solar power, and hybrid combinations. So Downers Grove continues to be recognized for its leadership, not only in environmental sustainability, but also innovation. And I could go on and on and on and on about village awards, or I could ask Doug Kozlowski, or actually, I don't think he's speaking in this one. I could just go to this video and give it to you in much less time. That's one of my favorites. But the best award of all is another one that we received in 2018, which was Downers Grove ranking 46 on the 2018 Top 100 Best Places to Live, published by Livability.com. According to Livability.com, Downers Grove has many advantages, including award-winning public schools, a strong economy, business-friendly environment, a scenic downtown, and great recreational spaces, which just goes to show that it takes a combination of things, both within and outside of our village, in order to receive this kind of recognition. So it's not just us telling ourselves that Downers Grove is a great place to live. It's nice to know that people outside of the community think so too. Well, don't worry, Commissioner Barnett, I'm coming to the end, but for the record, I think Doug Kozlowski has actually spoken more tonight than I have. So anybody who was placing bets, I think I totally threw you off. Often we're asked, so Mayor Tully, what is the state of the village? And I would say that the state of the village in 2018 and now in 2019 is strong and auspicious. The lessons of the past 8 years will be instructive for many yet to come. One in particular will be to continue to innovate wherever possible, to cooperate, collaborate, and consolidate local government resources wherever prudent and feasible. I want to thank the village staff for making all this possible. That's why the award video appropriately featured our staff, because they're the ones that truly deserve the trophies. But I also want to thank my colleagues in the Village Council for their leadership and vision. It truly is a team effort. If we all thought the same way, there would be no need to have 7 of us. And yet, I'm also often amazed that while we have our disagreements from time to time, I would say at least 80% of the time, our votes are unanimous. Maybe another 10, 15% of the time, we end up voting unanimously, but it takes us a while to get there. And then there are those questions where maybe it's 5% of the time, there really is no right answer. And so it's not a surprise that different people will have different perspectives, sort of like what color paint should we have on the wall? There is no right answer, there is no wrong answer. Everyone brings their perspectives, their experience, and their commitment to trying to do the right thing. And for that, I'm very appreciative. I want to thank the voice of Downers Grove, Doug Kozlowski, for narrating all those great videos, and Chris Durello for making all those amazing videos. I almost didn't have to say anything. I could have just played videos all night, but where would be the fun in that? I want to go back to something I said a moment ago, and that is when the Village Council really rolls up its sleeves and works together, we can get a lot done. And we can get even more done when we're not wearing any sleeves. Bet you forgot about that picture. The power of a team is important, but even more powerful is a phrase I'm going to borrow from the Downers Grove Rotary, which if those of you that go to Rotary Fest and have for many years, the shirts all say it's all about community. And I want to add to that. It really is all about community. I mentioned earlier that none of this would be possible without collaboration amongst staff, members of the community, and our many volunteers. On behalf of myself and all of the Village Council, we are deeply grateful to our volunteers on our 16 boards and commissions that help us really keep Downers Grove the great place it is to live as recognized by livability. I want to thank all of our residents for making our community such a wonderful place to be, because without their input and support, we couldn't do what we do. And that's always been the case, and I'm confident it will continue to be the case. I want to wrap up with 2 quotes. Given that this is the last State of the Village address that I will give as mayor, I want to leave everyone in the audience and watching at home and my colleagues as well as staff a couple of final quotes. Number 1 is from Naranja Murthy, who is the founder of Infosys. When you run a part of a relay and pass on the baton, there is no sense of unfinished business in your mind. There is just the sense of having done your part to the best of your ability. That's it. The hope is to pass on the baton to somebody who will run faster and run a better marathon. The second quote is one from another leader in business, formerly the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, Carly Fiorina. And this is something that I say all the time, both in my private sector life as well as in public sector life. That is, the highest calling of leadership is to challenge the status quo and unlock the potential of others. I urge the future council to do both of these things. And to all of the residents of Downers Grove, thank you for making 2018 amazing. I know that you will help the future council make 2019 and beyond even more amazing. This truly is a wonderful place to live, award or not. We all know it in our heart and in our soul. So with that, I am wrapping up the 2018 annual report. God bless you all, and best wishes for a terrific 2019. And the best part is that's probably the least amount I've talked in any village address yet because of the videos. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's attention. Thank you for that kind response. That brings us to item 5, which is reserved for public comments. Appropriately following the 2018 annual report, now this is the opportunity, as previously indicated, for any members of the audience who have any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things not on tonight's agenda. We welcome you to come to the podium. Please let us know what's on your mind. You're just all soaking in all that great information. Good evening, welcome.
Hello, my name is Marshall Schmidt. You'll hear from me later, but I wanted to comment on two things in your address. The first is the peer jury. My daughter was a juror in that program for many years, and she's gone on to what we're very proud of, many successes in the social justice area. And when the program was discontinued, I talked to her about it, and she was extremely upset. And when I told her that you had taken up the gauntlet and restored the program, she was very happy. She considers it to be a very important part of this community. She's commented several times how it was part of the experience she had here that really made her childhood here very, very special. So you should know that that was a wonderful thing that you did by picking that up. The other thing I wanted to comment on was Linda Kunze. I knew Linda Kunze very well through Rotary, and she lived 1 block over from me, and she was a very special person in this community, and I commend the village for honoring her in an appropriate way. I think it's a wonderful way to maintain the legacy of this village and to honor those people who make tremendous contributions. So thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. Any other questions or comments of a general nature from members of the audience? All right, very good. Well, thank you very much for your time and patience in listening to me. That will bring us to item 6, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Mayor Kelly, I move the council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any items on tonight's consent agenda? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Waldeck, good evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Just wanted to point out one of the items on the consent agenda. I believe it's item D, the money that we're going to invest on the streets. There's a list. Residents might want to check it out. Go on the website and see if their streets are up for resurfacing. Take advantage of the opportunity to find out what's ahead.
And what's that website, Commissioner?
www. Do we still put in www? Downers.us.
Very good, thank you.
And you check the government area and go down to this week's meetings and click on the items, and it all pops up. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda items from members of the council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7, our active agenda. We have one item on tonight's active agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance creating a Class R3 liquor license classification?
Mayor Kelly, I move the council adopt an ordinance creating a Class R3 liquor license classification as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on this item from any members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously, and that brings us to the end of our active agenda. Brings us to item 8, which is our first reading or our workshop agenda. We have a couple of items on tonight's first reading agenda. This is a little bit of a different approach. These items are here for presentation and discussion purposes only. No final action or vote will be taken on these items tonight. Typically what we do is we ask our village staff to present the items for initial questions and comments from the Village Council, and then we'll open it up for any questions or comments from members of the audience before we come back to the council. As always, we will start things off by introducing our award-winning village manager, Dave Fieldman. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully. Thank you so much for that introduction. We do have 2 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first item is consideration of a resolution for a 2-lot plat of re-subdivision for the properties at 1508 Warren Avenue and 4940 Sealy Avenue. Here to provide us background information on this petition is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Good evening, Mr. Popovich.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Manager Fieldman noted, the item tonight is a plat of subdivision. The 2 addresses shown here on the screen. The 2 properties are just west of downtown on the north side of the tracks at the corner of Warren and Sealy, specifically the northwest corner here outlined in black. Those are the 2 existing lots on the property. As you'll see in this image, as we zoom in a little bit, you can see one house on the western lot. There's a detached garage in the northwest corner of that lot. And then the eastern lot has a house on the north side and then a detached garage facing Warren Avenue there. What the petitioner is proposing to do is change the lots from an east-west orientation to a north-south orientation and do the two homes on that property. This outlines the existing structures shown here in a yellowy green color, and then you can see the light gray, which is the driveways. The property has an LPDA shown here in blue that is located across the lot and covers a significant portion of the western lot and then a fair portion of the eastern lot as well. With the current conditions and the two lots that are existing, the current property owner could build two homes on the property. The eastern house could be constructed principally outside of the LPDA with no LPDA impacts that way. The house on the west lot could be built. The home would have to be elevated out of the localized poorly drained area and be elevated a little bit, which would involve some filling of that to create a base and a platform in essence. And then along with that, they would have to then cut out some of the LPDA to provide compensatory storage at a 1-to-1 ratio. So if I fill 1 cubic foot in an LPDA, I'd have to cut out 1 cubic foot somewhere else within that same LPDA on that property. So that's what could potentially happen if the lots stayed in this in this same shape. And then if we move along to what's going to be proposed, this again shows the existing conditions. With the proposal that was provided in a preliminary engineering plan that was provided to staff prior to the scheduling of the Plan Commission meeting, it showed these two proposed houses here shown in the burnt orange, and then the driveway and a patio shown here in gray. With the proposal to subdivide the lots this way, what you see is that both of the homes are built on the higher ground, and the LPDA is in essence, the houses stay out of the LPDA. You'll also see that because we're removing the structures and the driveways out of there, particularly on the western lot, you're going to lose about 2,400 square feet of impervious area that's currently in the LPDA. So what that's going to do is it's going to help the water that's flowing from the northeast corner to the southwest corner of this lot not have to go around the house. It can infiltrate where the driveway used to be. It can infiltrate where a house used to be and where a roof used to be. That's impervious surface. So the proposal, as it shows, puts the houses on the higher end of the lot and lets the rear yard, in this case, be the LPDA, where it's not going to impact the structures that are proposed to be built on the property. Again, the proposed engineering plan that was submitted previous to the Plan Commission meeting showed setbacks here. So these would be R3 zoning setbacks, which are single-family residential. The setback off the street is, on the north lot, is 36 feet. Side yard is 6 feet. And then in the rear, it's about 101 feet to the west property line. On the southern lot, you have a 30-foot setback. That is the minimum requirement in the R3 zoning district. 6 foot on the north, 96 feet to the west property line. And then because this is a corner lot, anybody on a corner lot is afforded at least a 30-foot wide buildable area for the house. And then in this case, they're proposing a porch that's allowed to encroach for the zoning ordinance. So the setback on the south side would be 16 feet as proposed and as shown in the preliminary engineering plans there that were submitted previously. Both developments, as Mayor Tully noted in the annual report, would have to meet our updated residential stormwater storage requirements. So that would assume that because both of these properties are located outside of the LPDA, that both of these proposed homes would have basements. Homes in LPDAs typically do not have basements. So with that, we would see a 50 cubic foot requirement for residential stormwater storage based on sump pumps being in each of the new homes. And then we don't have final determination on the amount of change in impervious areas, but we would anticipate at least one of the houses, if not both of the houses, would add about 0 to 700 square feet of impervious area, probably on the lower end. But if that would trigger it, anything over 0 square foot of net new impervious would trigger 100 cubic feet of storage as well. So the whole improvements by switching the lot lines and running the north lot and the south lot, you'd remove about 2,400 square feet of impervious area in the LPDA, and you provide at least 100 additional cubic feet of stormwater storage on those two lots as well. If we move to the comprehensive plan, we can see a few areas that are identified in the comprehensive plan. The plan notes that we should facilitate residential redevelopment to maintain a quality housing stock. We should provide a variety of housing types. We should work to improve stormwater management, and we should discourage improvements in the LPDAs and other floodplains. By reorienting these lots, so we have a north lot and a south lot, we're moving an existing structure out of the LPDA into higher ground on the same lot. With regard to the subdivision, minimum lot depth and lot area requirements are met. Petitioner is requesting an exception to the lot width, which requires a 75-foot wide lot. They're requesting a 56-foot wide lot. Exception criteria, we don't see that very often, but those criteria are not as stringent as variation standards. The way they're written is different than variation standards. They're not as stringent. The standards here shown are impacts, and I'll go over each one of those as well. Impacts on surrounding areas, surrounding properties. So we're removing a lot of impervious area from an existing LPDA. That's going to allow the more gradual flow of water across that lot, allow more infiltration. We're removing an impediment in that area to the existing LPDA as well. We're proposed to build new homes. The developers propose to build new homes on a higher piece of property where water can get around the house and into the lower portion of the property. The trend of development is to replace these smaller, outdated homes with larger homes with attached garages. You can also see that all the lots on Sealy Avenue moving north. Warren Avenue is here on the south. You can see all those on Sealy are oriented towards Sealy Avenue. You can see on Wallbank, again, those lots are east-west orientation with a north lot and a south lot. And then as well, moving over towards Montgomery, you see that there's one lot in the middle there that is oriented north-south, but the majority of those are oriented, so there's a north lot and a south lot. Moving on to the characteristics of the property, the ground is lower to the west, and generally is going to hold water during those heavier rains, those larger storms. That's where the water is going to go, and it's drier and higher on the east. So, from a practical sense, it makes sense to move the homes if they're going to be rebuilt or repositioned towards the east, so they're out of the LPDAs as well. With regard to conformance with the general plan, in this case the comprehensive plan, I went over that a couple of slides ago, but it's to discourage development in LPDAs, improve stormwater management, provide a variety of housing, and facilitate residential redevelopment to maintain high-quality housing stock here in the village, which is one of the key things why we're one of the top livable communities, as the mayor noted earlier. With regard to consistency with the character, this neighborhood has seen a lot of redevelopment with older homes being replaced by more modern homes. And then again, we go back to the orientation of the lots facing Sealy Avenue there as well. During the Plan Commission meeting, the Plan Commission found that the proposal met the criteria and the exception standards and recommended approval. Mr. Pesavano, the petitioner, is here tonight as well that can answer any questions, or if you have any questions for me tonight, I'd be happy to answer those for you at this time as well.
Thank you, Mr. Popovich. Appreciate the presentation and going through all the different criteria. That was very helpful. Questions from members of the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
I will wait till after the public has a chance to comment. We are coming back.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
By all means. Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. Stan, with regard to the flow of water, you said it goes west, or does it also dip south at all?
So it goes south and west. So generally that water is coming down from the north. I'm going to switch to a different plan here. So generally the water flows in the back here, but it also has a cross slope this way. This is where there's a connection that goes underneath the railroad tracks.
Right.
So all the water comes generally like this down here. So that's why you see the LPDA, when it's shown on this plan, it's generally on the southwest section of the line.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
Other questions from the council? I've got a few. What is the lot width of the parcel that is facing Warren Avenue currently? I could probably look it up, but I figured you'd find it faster. And while you're looking, I'll tell you what my concerns are. I mean, I get this, but I've always had an aversion to creating more lots in the village that are less than our required width. We were talking about strengthening our stormwater regulations, and one of the things I know is that the smaller lot sizes that, yes, historically have popped up in a lot of neighborhoods and exist in a lot of neighborhoods, they're there. The question is should we be creating more of them and the challenges that go with them on the one hand. And here we're not even talking about just going below the 75 or going below 60, which on the one hand gives me pause. On the other hand, I appreciate the presentation because I also understand what we're trying to do here, which is really to get houses out of an LPDA. Because right now there's a house sitting smack dab in an LPDA and it floods all the time and it's just a bad situation. And so we're trying to encourage getting houses out of an LPDA, and that's a competing interest of the community. I also understand the standards here. Section 20.602, exceptions, C, says an exception shall be recommended by the Plan Commission only if it finds that there are practical difficulties or particular hardships in the way of carrying out the strict letter of the provisions of the subdivision ordinance. And by itself, that would give me considerable pause, but it goes on to say that in its consideration of the standards of practical difficulties or particular hardships, the Commission may consider, but is not limited to, the following. You touched upon a few of them already, Stan. Trend of development of the neighborhood, the impact upon the surrounding community, the characteristics of the property which support or mitigate against granting the exception, and the explanation of the LPDA and how that limits any future development of either one of those parcels, whether reconfigured or not, is clear. And then whether or not it will be consistent with or alter the essential character of the locality. And again, on the one hand, I see what the locality is. I see that. On the other hand, if we go back in time and not create a whole bunch of 50 and 60 foot wide lots, we probably wouldn't. And so in that's just the struggle that I'm having, which is why I talked long enough now so you could find the answer to my question, which is what's the lot width of the house on Warren?
Thank you, Mayor, for delaying me. I appreciate that. On the west lot, it measures 80 feet frontage, and it's 107 feet deep. So it's 80 by 107.
Okay.
And then the east lot is 120 by 113. So you'll see on Sealy Avenue, it's actually 113 feet in north-south, and then it is not really a piece of pie, but it's pie-like that way. And I did fail to mention that all the lots in that neighborhood are 60 feet wide.
Understood.
Yes.
I can see the map. I see how they're oriented. I see what their widths are. I just know that some years ago, certain people on this council have sort of taken the position that we shouldn't create any more lots of that narrowness. It goes to the issue of strengthening our stormwater regulations. Okay, they're there, but why should we create more? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, I see what we're trying to do here, and I also see what the practical challenges are, which arguably fits the criteria. I'm sort of thinking out loud right now, but thank you for the question. You can see the tension in my mind, but we're not voting tonight. Thank you. Commissioner White.
How wide are the lots across Sealy that face this? How wide are the lots on the east side of Sealy?
They're probably 60.
60.
Both of them are 60?
So Sealy all the way north is 60, it measures at 60 feet.
One of them is 56 feet.
56, yeah.
The one immediately adjacent reads in the staff report to the Plan Commission that it's 56 feet wide.
Okay, so the lot that's precisely at the northeast corner of Warren and Sealy is 56.
Yeah, the property at 4943 Sealy is 56 feet wide.
So 56 and then 60 all the way up.
60 all the way up.
And the proposal would be 56 and 60 all the way up. Okay.
And then there is one, if you just go across to the east, there is another home built on that lot that is oriented on Warren Avenue. So they're not all oriented to the north-south streets. I get it. My point is I could clearly see what the trend of development is in the neighborhood. This goes back to an issue that we would try to get rid of things historically like flag lots and other creative ways to carve up and make smaller and smaller lots, which make our stormwater challenges more and more difficult. That being said, there's an LPDA here, and there are real limits on what can be done. So that's just the struggle in my mind. Like I said, we're not voting tonight. Commissioner Waldeck.
I do have a question. With the 60-foot lots and the requirements for 75-foot lots, they get grandfathered, so if a person sells their house and the house remains, they can continue to keep the 60-foot house. But if somebody tears it down and wants to rebuild, they're going to be required to have a 75-foot lot or come in and ask for exceptions, right?
No, so
What happened?
because that lot was lawfully created under the laws at that time.
Okay.
So they're allowed to rebuild. They just have to meet the current setback requirements.
Okay.
So they can rebuild and meet the setback requirements.
Thank you.
Might be a different house, but they could rebuild.
Okay.
Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for indulging me twice. Stan, there's reference that neither of the current lots are conforming. Could you tell me a little more about that?
Well, and every new lot that you create is required to be 75 feet wide by 140 feet deep. So in some instances, the lot depth is not met on those two lots that are existing because they're 113 and I think I said 107.
So we're going from a proposal, or a current situation where they're not deep enough, and we're looking at a proposal where they're not wide enough.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor,
Commissioner Barnett.
following a little along Greg's thought process, we would also be, though, minimum, there's more than one nonconformity, right? There's minimum depths, but there's also minimum areas, because that one lot is 8,700 square feet, something like that. So we'd have lots, if we look at that table that's on page 3, we'd be more conforming, if you will, more attributes would be conforming in the potential, the proposal, than compared to now, right? Because you got minimum areas and minimum depths that are a
Correct,
problem.
because roughly the 80 by 100
Yeah.
is roughly 8,000, 9,000 square feet.
Right. So we'd end up with lots that were, from a general stormwater standpoint, were likely more, the LPD is obvious, but they also, because they'd be a larger area, would be more manageable from a building standpoint. 11,000 square feet versus 8.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, members of the council?
Just
Commissioner
a
Wallace?
quick question statement. So just to be clear and put it in the most simple terms, if we reorient the lots, we leave the LPDA, and if we leave them, then we have to find a way to build on Warren, and the entire house would be in the LPDA.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, because the way the setbacks would work on that lot, existing conditions in the western lot, there wouldn't really be any space to put a home
Correct.
onto that.
Thank you.
And there's already a house in the middle of an LPDA, which has not been a good situation for a long time. Make no mistake, I get it. I get it. Other questions from the council? Okay, questions from the audience or the petitioner? Good evening, welcome back.
I'm back. Could you leave that on the screen, please? First, I'd like to pose an objection because none of this material was either presented at the Planning Commission or, to my knowledge, made available to the public before this hearing. So I reserve the right to comment on these materials when this comes up for a vote because I think this was not a good way to go about this.
Just on that point, not only will you have the opportunity to comment before we vote on this, but we're not voting on this until March 5th. So feel free to comment at any time between now and then.
I will. But before I go into my prepared remarks, I want to point out something that I think is really disingenuous, because if you look at this drawing will require you to build in the LPDA. Okay? The drawing that shows the LPDA will run under that house. So you're going to have to take steps, even in this configuration, which, by the way, before the Planning Commission, we were told that there was no plan for where the house was going to be put, how big the house was going to be. The plans that were presented were only presented as kind of examples. Now it's set with setbacks and the whole works, and it's set, and now you're seeking approval based on that. That's really inappropriate and I think unfair. But let me lay out, because I'll take on the specifics of that on March 5th. As I said before, my name is Marshall Schmidt, and I've lived at 4923 Sealy for almost 29 years. The proposed platting that you're looking at is contrary to the best interests of the village, and it has two very serious deficiencies. One is that the evidence that is presented, and before tonight, no evidence was presented as to why this would work or how it fit in with the exceptions, and the exceptions criteria were not laid out. But more importantly, there's no account taken for how you adjust the plan while you're making these plots much narrower. The statute requires a 75-foot width. That 75-foot width then leads to other setbacks and requirements that are based upon conforming the house so that it fits the character. Well, when you narrow the lot by over 19 feet, approximately 25%, you need to take into account the area on the lot, the setbacks, and the whole works. We've seen in this neighborhood, and I'll talk about this when we talk about the trend, but you talk about the trend in the neighborhood, how houses are being built in this neighborhood, and that is true. But that's a trend that's been created by the village in how it deals with the setbacks and everything else, and the result of that has been very negative. The big houses that are built on this lot are built lot line to lot line. You have crazy things where you have retention ponds that take up most of the front yard. You have a driveway that's up against the lot line, except when you have to meet the setback at the curb, and so the driveway takes this crazy turn, so that you can barely get the house, you can barely get the car by the house. It's terrible, okay? And it's destroying the integrity of the neighborhood. You have to take into account, and this proposal does not, you have to take into account that the setbacks and all of the requirements for these lots come as a package. And when you narrow it to 60 feet, below 60 feet, it's not 60 feet, it's below 60 feet. It's 56.25. It's below 60 feet. You have to take that into account. Now, this was touched upon in your comments. These lots are not non-conforming. These lots are conforming. And why are they conforming? Because these lots existed when you passed the zoning ordinances. They are not non-conforming. They are consistent with the plan, because when the plan was adopted, it was determined, the judgment was made that lots like this would stay the way they were, and they would be grandfathered in for the owner. But once ownership transfers, and someone says, okay, I want to reconfigure the lots, you surrender the grandfathering. You surrender the right to build on them. And that's what's happening here. So the contractor is coming here asking to make two very narrow lots, build houses that are essentially lot line to lot line, okay, at the end of a corner which is now open, okay, it will dramatically change the character of the neighborhood. And the trend that the community development and the contractor are relying upon is a trend that was created by this council. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not a good trend. It's not a trend you want to continue. So the contractor is playing a game here. The contractor says, let's narrow the lots. Give me the narrow lots because I want to deal with the LPDA. But as we've seen, they're going to have to account for the stormwater. If they build the house on the existing lots, which, by the way, at the Planning Commission, which didn't come up today, the contractor has admitted that these are buildable lots. In fact, I think the statement at the Planning Commission was 2 new homes are going to be built on these lots, however they're configured. And as one of the Planning commissioners pointed out, that will require the contractor to take steps to deal with the LPDA. And that can be done. It's been done on other lots in the neighborhood, and it can be done here. And this is the proof that it can be done, because they're doing it on the southernmost lot. They're putting building in the LPDA. So what this boils down to is that the contractor will make more money if you leave it the way it is. But the residents in the neighborhood will pay the price in a lowered quality of the neighborhood. Now, several of you know me from a few years ago when I came to this board asking to build a gazebo because we purchased our neighbor's house and we were building a gazebo. And this body held us to the strictest standards, even though there was no dispute in that case that what was being proposed was going to improve the neighborhood. Here, there's serious question, at a minimum, that this will improve the neighborhood. What did you require us to do? You issued a special use that said if we ever sell that property, we have to tear the gazebo down. We were held to the strictest standards, and limitations were placed on us. But what limitations are being placed on the contractor here? None. They're getting a major exception that will have a dramatic impact on this property. A dramatic impact. And no other adjustments are being made. No other requirements as to bigger setbacks or smaller homes. If you really want to deal with the stormwater issue, require a smaller home that would be built entirely out of the LPDA. But that's not what's going on here. They can build bigger homes and take advantage of the setbacks. Mayor Tully talked about the balance between tradition and progress and talked about innovation. The way to deal with this is not to blindly grant an exception to a contractor, but to require the contractor to be innovative, to deal with these pieces of property in an innovative way, to deal with the issues, and to propose a solution that will not impair the integrity of the neighborhood, will not merely blindly build up the neighborhood with lot line to lot line homes. This is a wonderful place to live. But that's because there's a variety of housing. And that was cited as one reason to grant the exception. But this isn't creating a variety of housing. This is eliminating a variety of housing and making cookie-cutter huge new homes on small lots. That's what's going on here. We have historic, intimate neighborhoods, and this neighborhood is one of them. These are streets where kids run through the yards playing with friends. It's not an environment of one huge mega home after another, built lot line to lot line. But that's what this neighborhood is becoming. Existing lots might not maximize the profits for the contractor, for the builders, but they contribute to the joy of living in these neighborhoods. They create joy among the residents that experience living and raising families here. The comprehensive plan that created these existing lots and imposed the 75-foot requirement and all of the things that go along with that 75-foot requirement were designed to preserve and propagate the joy of the residents of this town. It is your job to protect that joy. It is your job to be creative. It is your job to balance tradition and progress and deal with these issues and not just accept what the contractor has to say. And look at pictures like this and see it for what it is, a rationalization that can be dealt with in other ways. And to do that, you should deny the petition as presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Schmidt. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Good evening, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Rich DeMink. I was here a couple weeks ago, and I live at 4904 Sealy. I would just like to support what Mr. Schmidt said. I live in the same street that he does, and I'm the guy who sent all of you, hopefully you received my email with an attached picture. Just a couple of comments. I don't want to take any more of your time. I couldn't do as good a job as Mr. Schmidt, but I would just like to point out a couple other things. The retention ponds, I want to just mention those. I'm wondering how the retention pond that you're going to require on one of these lots, the way I'm hearing it now, is going to be 100 cubic feet. For those of you that received the picture I sent, that retention pond currently is 50 feet. The one that's in the proposal, which I believe would be one of the two houses, is going to have 100 cubic feet. That retention pond, if this plan goes through, will be twice as big as this one. And I would encourage you to drive by the site and take a look at it. And the other thing, the last thing I would like to say is, it goes without saying that the number of mature trees will be destroyed in this process. The staff report indicated there is no private tree ordinance, which is true in this village. Maybe this body should think about taking a stand against cutting down mature trees and maybe adopt some kind of a tree ordinance. Granted, it's private property. Other villages around here have done that. This would be an opportunity for you folks to stand up. And I think it matters that a large number of the residents in my neighborhood oppose this petition as it stands. We do recognize that the right of the petitioner to build on each of these lots. There's no question about that. These are buildable lots. We understand that. But they are buildable, and we are strongly against it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? If you could please come to the podium, ma'am, so that everybody at home can hear you, please. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's Sarah Demink. I'm married to Rich and live at 4904 Sealy, and I speak for the trees. So, you know, the name of our village is Downers Grove, and I'm proud of that, and we have wonderful oak trees that we're trying to preserve on our property. It goes without saying that if these two houses are built, I think it's crazy to think of building two houses on those lots. If anything, I think it should be one house, a smaller one, preserve more of the trees on the lot. Trees are a much more effective way of providing water management on property. No one has mentioned that. Oak trees absorb an amazing amount of water. When you come in and cut trees down, you're losing that natural drainage. You have a picture of the lot on the corner of Sealy and Prairie. The reason that that pond is there is because the beautiful oak trees were cut down to build that monstrosity house. So I really think you should consider this in the big picture. We are a Downers Grove. We want to preserve our natural areas. We do not want to build, as Marshall said, lot-to-lot houses, which are way too large for the lots, and they don't provide natural drainage. So I urge you to consider that and vote no on this petition. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Comments from the petitioner. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. How are you? I'll be very, very brief. I just wanted to address some of the concerns that were brought up just as I kind of sat down and heard some of the comments. I agree. I agree on a lot of the things that I've heard tonight. I agree the fact that the trees are very important, and nothing has indicated that this redevelopment would cause more trees to come down, which is why I'm surprised that there's a lot of adamancy that that would be the case. If the current lots stayed the way they were, there would need to be some trees that would obviously need to come down to make two new homes go on as it is. Much like if they got redeveloped and reconfigured, some trees would inevitably need to come down as well. So I think in either scenario, you know, that's a possibility, but I don't see anything to indicate that there would be more in one scenario versus another scenario. So I just don't think it's really a matter of the trees. I know that it was brought up that there was lot line to lot line building. If you look at not this slide, but the other slide where you can see those lots, clearly those are not conforming as it is right now in terms of the depth, since they're only about 113 deep, 120 deep, whatever the case may be. So whatever home would be built on that current Warren lot, for example, that would certainly be a lot line to lot line build, because you have your setback and then you have your rear setback, and whatever you kind of squish in the middle is what you have for a home. So that home would probably be quite wide. I think the same can be said for the corner property if it was to be built on as it is. So again, if two homes are built on the lots as they sit right now, those are going to be lot line to lot line builds. And there's going to need to be care taken with the trees, much like if they were reconfigured. So I don't think either one of those are real swing discussion points, because the same thing is going to apply in either scenario. It's really a matter of what helps the stormwater situation for the area. And clearly, as was shown earlier, all these backyards on Sealy, they drain to the west. And the block to the west, all those backyards drain as well to the east. So essentially it's like one big funnel. Everybody's backyard is all coming to the lot line, and then it all just shoots south. And that's why that one little red house there right on that corner is constantly having water problems, because everything just pours through there. So essentially what we're trying to do by reconfiguring is we're trying to take the cork off the bottle and let the water come through. So it eases some of the stormwater issues in the entire area, which I think makes a lot of sense. With the new configuration, neither one of these homes are going to be directly in the LPDA. The LPDA would be configured in a way that it would be in the backyard, but not in the footprint of the home itself. So I think it certainly is worth mentioning that. Obviously, it's not very desirable for the neighborhood to have the lots sit as they are, because I think everybody familiar with those two sites knows that they're a bit distressed, and an improvement would greatly benefit. The homes that are illustrated here are not large homes by today's construction standards. I believe they're about 3,200 square feet. So again, probably small by what's considered today's new construction standards. But again, if the previous scenario, new homes were built, they would probably also be in that range of roughly 3,200 square feet. So I just think those are things that are worth mentioning, because these aren't things that we think are going to be dramatically different in one scenario versus another. It's really what's going to create the most benefit for the stormwater issue out there. And if it happens to create more compliance with the other lots in the neighborhood, obviously, that can be considered advantageous as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any remaining questions or comments from members of the audience?
Would he be able to answer?
Oh, excuse me, ma'am?
Would he be able to answer where the retention ponds would be located on the property?
He doesn't have to answer that question, but I can ask him that question, because I don't think anybody heard you. And it's up to you as the petitioner. The question was, if you are moved to answer it, is where the detention ponds would be located.
And I cannot 100% answer that question, because
Understood.
all the specifics of the stormwater development for these two particular sites really haven't been laid out to that degree of detail. But comparable systems would need to be provided regardless of the development situation.
Right. And my guess is that would be finalized in conjunction with our village staff according to our stormwater requirements as newly strengthened. So it doesn't surprise me that you're not able to answer that question to that degree of specificity right now.
But they're likely on the western half of the lot.
Right. Yeah. You can
Somewhere on the western
roughly
half.
imagine where it would go, but the schematics have not been drafted yet, because that doesn't surprise me.
Correct.
So that's the best we can answer at this point in time. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience? All right, very good. I'm going to come back to the members of the village council as promised. Any further questions or comments, Commissioner White?
I have a question for Stan, and then you can help explain the process. How is it that the house on the south lot would be built outside the LPDA? I think I know the answer, but I want that sort of on the record as to how they reconfigure the lot and what the requirements are to raise up the building pad so that the building pad is outside the reconfigured LPDA. I just want it on the record as to how that works.
So So what they would end up doing is in the current configuration, that the schematic house on the bottom, if I go the right way, they would, in essence, like you said, build sort of the pad up and then provide comm storage as well on that
And what's that
same
ratio?
lot.
So for every cubic foot that they build up the pad, that they need to add a cubic foot of depth.
Correct. It's a cut fill calculation. So every time you would fill 1 cubic foot of an LPA with soil, you would then cut 1 cubic foot somewhere else.
So basically, the building pad for the south house will be elevated up out of the LPDA, and then the LPDA will be deepened by an equivalent amount.
Correct, but if you wouldn't necessarily fill as much, conceptually at this point, the way this house is laid out, you wouldn't fill as much at this location because you would just be clipping this sort of
Depends
corner
on the
right
exact
here
topographical survey.
with
and
that
the lot, yeah.
house.
Okay.
Which is why we can't be that precise at this moment.
There's more information that was presented and submitted with the Plan Commission packet near the end of the packet. I think it's a technical drawing, but I think for those looking for how it's going to be reconfigured, there's a lot of information that...
But conceptually, it's a one-for-one trade, and you try to find the location that requires the least amount of trade to get the house out of the LPDA.
Correct.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck, we've been on the edge of our seats.
Please don't be. It's going to be terribly boring, actually.
I could play a video if you prefer.
Well, I don't think, I don't know.
We have one.
We haven't heard any bagpipes tonight, so. Yeah, naturally tonight, as you mentioned, we're not voting, but I want to be clear where I'm at right now, so that in the intervening weeks, if I'm wrong, or I'm open to more input. But the mayor has properly mentioned section 20602C. An exception shall be recommended by the Plan Commission if it finds that there are practical difficulties or particular hardships in the way of carrying out the strict letter of the provisions of the subdivision ordinance. And then there's five items. I won't go through all of them, but the first one, the extent to when the proposed exceptions impact the value or reasonable use of the surrounding properties. And I'll skip down to number 5. These are important to me. Whether the exception will alter or be considered with the essential character of the locality. And as I read through the Plan Commission minutes, I think it was too bad that the Plan Commission has a limited view of precedent. Sometimes it's good that you constantly refresh a commission with new members, have new eyes, a fresh look on things, but then at the same time, as we continue on, the view back becomes more and more limited. And I think that's the case that happened here. I find that the owners want to create a hardship and now want to claim that they have a hardship that needs to have exceptions. At present, they conform, but future plans create a need for the exceptions. There is no current hardship. Having been on the council for a number of years, and the mayor has brought that up as well, we've had a number of land use petitions over the years, especially during the tear-down boom, and that was over a decade ago. Councils carefully and deliberately and enthusiastically had various debates on 50-foot lots, 60-foot lots, 75-foot lots. We know it is the street view that really creates the impact and values in a neighborhood, more so than lot depth. Side requirements reduce with the lot width. Development will squeeze what they can out of every lot. So the idea of lot line to lot line, or whatever they can possibly do to increase the value, You can't blame them. That's what they're going to do. Council made an extremely big deal about the smaller widths, and 75-foot was determined to be, was decided on. 60-foot and other widths were grandfathered in, and they're not meant to be standard. The Plan Commission looks outward and sees a trend of big houses. But developers are always going to try to get put in big houses. It's natural. The car manufacturers are going, you'll have a hard time getting a compact car because the money to be made is in the bigger trucks. So it kind of falls true here. By continuing or granting the exceptions, the Planning Commission is actually creating a trend long-term, and the prior councils wanted to be reasonable, so they set reasonable limits. So after a trendy Planning Commission gives into yet another developer, the trend is unhappy residents and neighbors who call us about the problems in their neighborhoods. So Plan Commission sees the trend, and then it's council that hears from the neighborhood saying, why are you doing this to us? So to get technical here the hardship is manufactured and exists only if the plan is accepted. Here the requirement is 75 feet. When we used to when we used to debate exceptions of 4 or 5 feet, and here it's nearly 19 feet. Here the grandfathered lots are 60 feet wide, and only one is 56. The current conditions are 60 foot, and the petitioner wants it to be 4.8 feet less. Brings me back to the earlier days you mentioned, Mayor. This is an LPDA. While the residents were told that they can't conjecture as to what's going to be built and trees, etc., yet when the developer and staff goes to the Plan Commission, there's a lot of conjecture going on, including how we're going to mitigate stormwater, how our rules are going to affect it, and we keep hearing how we don't want to build on LPDAs. I don't have that much confidence. We try our best to handle stormwater, especially with LPDAs, and we constantly hear that there's still problems. We try, the council really tries, staff really tries, but I don't have that kind of confidence in what might be proposed to solve the problem, that it will solve a problem. So right now, I'm really not in favor of this petition at this point. Like I said, no decision tonight, but I would like to hear. We got a few weeks before decision time, but right now, I'd rather enforce the current rules and not grant the exceptions. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Barnett.
There's a couple of questions, kind of, I guess probably Stan, these are directed for you. The setbacks, if this thing went forward and is reconfigured, would the setback, do we have different setback requirements for 75-foot lots versus 60-foot lots?
Yes.
And so would we be requiring 75-foot lot base setbacks or 60-foot lot base setbacks?
It's based on the lot, so it would be off 60 foot right now.
Okay, so
it's it's 10% a lot width.
Okay.
No less than 6 in this case.
Okay.
In the zoning district, if it was a 75-foot wide lot, you'd have 7.5-foot setbacks.
Gotcha. And then with the LPDA, when building in the LPDA and the 1-to-1 ratio, would the removal of the existing structures work in that, be figured in that equation, or would we be sort of starting from the LPDA as though those structures weren't there?
So
I told you there was going to be a test.
It is, I know. I wish I had a video.
You can make one.
I think it's already been made.
The LPDA elevation at this location is 703.9.
Okay.
So it generally follows that line that's shown here. The existing house, I don't know the exact top of foundation that it's at. So if you were to remove that house, you would, in essence, fill that basement in to the adjacent grade. You wouldn't. So if the house was up, I think there's a step up to the house, a few steps up to the front of that house on the left. So you would fill in the grade to the grade existing around it. So if you look at the topo, there's a little bit of a bermy high point right here. So you could take that out to lower that and reduce that amount of fill in the right of way or in the LPDA. I apologize.
But the engineering calcs are based on the established flood elevation that Mr.
Yeah,
Popovich mentioned.
which is a
right?
7039.
Regardless of whether there's a house in it or not.
Yeah, it looks like some of the houses below the 7039 is what I'm getting at. There's area covered by existing structure below 7039.
That's probably a safe assumption, correct?
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, that answers my question.
This isn't a question, this is just a brief comment about how I'm looking at this. The metaphor of the cork in the bottle it resonates with me. And if a larger home were built on the western lot, we've made a bigger cork. And that blocks the flow of water from the entire neighborhood will back up at that cork. I'm looking at it that way. On the other hand, I totally understand how putting two houses facing on Sealy changes how the neighborhood looks. It just does. So how do we get the water to the inlet pipe that goes underneath the railroad tracks if, we go back to the other one, the house on the west is made larger? We've just made how do we get the water past that house to the pipe that goes under the railroad tracks? Those are the constraints that I'm looking at, because I don't want to build a bigger cork, and I have no problem seeing how pulling out that cork, even if it makes Sealy less attractive from some points of view, makes it easier for the water from the entire block to reach St. Joseph's Creek, which is on the south side of the railroad tracks. I mean, everything's connected all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So I don't want a bigger cork. I'd like to pull out the cork. And that goes to and this problem is replicated all over the village. So we got these kind of problems everywhere. And how much money can we spend to fix problems? And letting them build letting them build a bigger cork, then we'll back water up the block. But we can't tell them no, because they have the right to build as of right. So
in conformance with our stormwater regulations.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It's a conundrum at this point. At this point, is all I can say is I see valid principles on both sides, and it's a conundrum.
Mayor?
Good thing it's a workshop.
Yep.
Commissioner Barnett.
Just one more thing about that. The stormwater, when we talk about in conformance with the stormwater ordinance, we're talking largely about roughly about compensatory storage as opposed to surface flow paths, which is what Commissioner White's talking about. So the stormwater ordinance compliance wouldn't really help.
I was simply
help
clarifying that building as of right doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. There are rules to these sort of things, as one says.
Sure. Surface flow is an issue in a lot of places that would be materially worse if this was a bigger footprint.
I get what we're trying to accomplish here. It's not lost on me. But
and as a history major, cork in the bottle works well.
but I also have the history of when a lot of lots were created back in the day that, in my opinion, should not have been created, and we've turned the tide and stopped doing that. And so while I see what we're trying to get at, that's what I'm struggling with. Mm-hmm. We used to have flag lots, for crying out loud, which was just an excuse to chop up everything. Forget about overflow. At any rate. Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm no history major, so when I heard the "there are rules" comment, I was going to reference the Big Lebowski.
It's very popular right now.
There you go.
I've seen Lebowski 2020 shirts.
I'll refrain from further comment. It's been said earlier that the current configuration of the lots is in line with is conforming. I wouldn't describe it as conforming. I would describe it as legal non-conforming, and if council wants to correct me on that, feel free. And I don't think there's anything...
Not to your face, anyway, maybe later.
It wouldn't be the first time I've been corrected on. And I don't think there's anything joyful about a house that's in an LPDA and constantly floods. That said, there is an obvious change to the character of the neighborhood by reorienting the lots. But at the same time, it is fairly consistent with the current character. When you look across the street and you've got a 56-foot lot and you've got other 60-foot lots up and down both sides of the block, it's hard to say that two lots that are just over 56 feet are not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. So I understand the concerns of the neighborhood, but I also struggle to say that these 56 and a quarter roughly foot lots would not be in the same character as what is already in the neighborhood. So at this point, I have to agree with the majority of the Plan Commission on their analysis. And I sympathize with the idea that we don't want to lose more trees. Nobody wants to lose more trees. But we're not going to see, as the developer said, one house and then an empty lot here. We're going to see two houses. And the question is, how are they going to be oriented? Are they going to be located in the LPDA? And are we going to build a bigger cork, or are we going to remove it? It's the current state of my thinking. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to give a whole new address now, just with this whole cork metaphor. There's endless possibilities. Any other questions or comments from the council? Amen. Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate all the comments and input from members of the audience. As mentioned, this was a workshop. We're not voting tonight. We've obviously had a good discussion, and we won't be voting until March 5th at the earliest. And, of course, have the opportunity to further consider this and also receive additional input. So thank you for all those who have provided what they have so far. Believe it or not, corks notwithstanding, we still have another item on the agenda for first reading.
Thank you, Mayor. Speaking of stormwater and stormwater-related improvements, the final item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance providing for the issuance of $7 million worth of bonds for stormwater project capital improvements. Here to provide background information on this item is our Finance Director, Judy Butney.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening, Ms. Butney. Congratulations.
Thank you. As Dave mentioned, we prepared a parameters ordinance for a not-to-exceed amount of $7 million in general obligation bonds for stormwater projects. This is consistent with the 2019 budget and the discussions at long-range planning from last summer. The proceeds of this bond issuance will be used to complete the non-floodplain spa projects, and this will take us to the end of 2020. We expect the competitive sale on these bonds to be completed in April of 2019. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does that AAA bond rating have any impact on the rates that we get
It should get
for
us the
issuance of bonds?
best possible rate you could imagine.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the council?
All of this is 100% consistent with the budget that we passed and discussed in the fall.
It is.
So we're implementing prior decisions we've evaluated and discussed.
We are.
Okay, let's vote tonight, yes.
Well, there are rules for these kind of things, Commissioner White. No, actually, though, but picking up on what was stated earlier as part of the 2018 report, when I hinted at there being future projects for 2019 and beyond, this is a piece of that. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you again, Mayor.
I will give you $1 not to use the word cork.
I'll give you $2 if you do.
Keep going. Do I hear five? Just a quick question. You explained it's going to be $7 million. We're going to spend it on stormwater, and it's a general obligation bond, which means that if anything happens, the village as a whole is needs to pay this back. So it's a general obligation. But how are we going to pay this $7 million back?
That's a great question, Commissioner. The full faith and credit of the village is behind these bonds, but what we will do is we will abate any levy on these bonds and fund it with stormwater revenues from stormwater fees.
There we go. The exact answer I knew, but I thought it's important for the public to hear, so they know what they're paying for. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, that's a very good point, Commissioner Waldeck, because I suspect, and I am not a finance director, but I have stayed in the Holiday Inn Express, I suspect that while we could dedicate the stormwater utility fee revenue to the bonds directly, we probably get a little bit better rate by putting the full faith and credit of the village behind it, which is why we do that. So we have the revenue stream, and somebody said, well, why don't you just use that revenue stream? The answer is if we put the full faith and credit of the entire village behind it, we get a better rate, saving us all money.
That is correct.
Good point, Mayor.
See, staying in that Holiday Inn Express paid off. Thank you. Other questions, comments from the council? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, well, right back at you, Mr. Fieldman. Number 9, manager's report.
No further report tonight.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No metaphors. All right, item 10, village attorney's report. Good evening, Ms. Petrarca.
Good evening, Mayor. Only one item tonight to present, and that is an ordinance providing for the issuance of not to exceed $7 million in general obligation bonds. That is all, Mayor. It'll appear on the March 5th active agenda.
Terrific. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 11, which is reserved for council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to share with those in the audience or watching at home either items of interest going on in the community or to report out in their role as liaisons to other boards or public entities. So I have no report now because I have to concede mine to Commissioner Wallace. I'll start with Commissioner Jose this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking forward to Commissioner Wallace's tasty report. I have nothing else.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
No report, Mayor.
All right, well, now I have to save you for last after that build-up. Commissioner Barnett.
No report, Mayor.
Commissioner White.
No report.
I have no further report. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a report. District 99 Education Foundation will host its 6th annual Pizza Wars fundraiser on Thursday, February 28th. The event will take place at South High in Downers Grove from 5:30 to 8. Tickets can be purchased for $10 each at www.pizzawars.org. Tickets can also be purchased at the door for $15. And I believe Mayor Tully wanted to jump on this because he thought that I would forget to mention the Downers Grove pizza establishments that would be participating. So I'm going to go ahead and mention those: Scuttlebutts, Tortorices, and Lou Malnati's. That is all there.
Thank you. Well done, Commissioner Wallace. Well worth the wait. With that, we have reached the end of our agenda tonight. I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mayor Tully, I move the council adjourn.
Second.
And I'm going to ask Ms. Miles to please call the roll.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?